to kind of start us off with a silly picture, and I'll explain what it means to me as we go along. It probably means something different to everybody. But I want you to get this picture of a monkey holding a lead, like a leash, and it's leading around an elephant. You know, you get the picture, maybe like a little monkey wearing the little suits, like the organ grinder suits, or the little costumes that they put on the animals in the circus. But just want you to get this idea of this playful little creature, this playful little monkey that seems to be motivated by impulse here, there, and everywhere. And it's holding on to this leader. And here's this huge creature, this powerful creature, this elephant that's just following it wherever it goes. Think about that. So what we're talking about today is we are talking about increasing awareness. We are talking about what Joel Goldsmith would call consciousness unfolding. And in order to kind of think about this, we have to, or we want to, let's put it this way, we want to kind of come to some understanding of what we are and where we're going. The big questions in life: who am I? Why am I here? And where am I going? And perhaps what am I is even a more appropriate question than who. And Stephen Covey in 7 Habits, I know that was very popular 25 years ago, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey suggests that one of the things that we can do in order to be successful, by whatever our definition of success is, to complete whatever it is that we started, is to start with the end in mind. You know, so when I'm going in to help somebody with a project, or called in to consult, those sorts of things, I always ask them, I say, okay, well, tell me, what does it look like when we're done? What is it that you want it to look like when we're done here? What are we shooting for? You know? And if I can get the client to work with me and say, well, when we're done, this is what we're going to have. You know, we're going to have this book of historical facts that when we're done, we're going to be able to sell it for a certain price to the people in our community who are interested in local history. Now I have an idea. You see, now I can see that. I can say, okay, I've got a target to shoot for. We're going to have a book, and it's going to have a target price. And now I can see if I can work a project that will lay out a project that will meet those needs. So starting with the end in mind is always a good idea, because otherwise, you start down one path and you get halfway down and say, well, that's not what I want. Not sure what I want, but that's not it. And then we back up and we go down another path and we try something else. And there's a lot of trial and error, which some people will call trial and success. You know, trial and success is you do something, you analyze it, you get your feedback, and you modify what you were doing, and you go on. And then there's also, kind of think it through. The think it through method is start with the end in mind. Think about what you're doing. Think about why you're doing it. Think about where you're going. And then you're more likely to take a direct path. And I often kind of use the analogy, if before we had cell phones and GPS and all sorts of things like that, if you wanted to go from the East Coast to the West Coast, well, you could just kind of get in your car and you could start following roads that were heading west, and just keep going. Just keep looking at the sunset and just keep finding a road that headed in that general direction. And sooner or later, you'll get there. Now you might take some detours along the way. You might take a road that starts out like it's heading west, and then all of a sudden it turns south on you, and it goes for a couple hundred miles, and so you find another road going where you want to go. So you would get there eventually. Eventually you would get there. But a more direct route would be if you had a map. If you had kind of a guidebook along the way. I don't know if anybody Anybody remembers years ago, if you were going on a trip, if you were a member of AAA, you would go to AAA and tell them where you were leaving and where you were going, and they would give you this little map book, and it was spiral bound on the top, and you would flip it over, and it had little map sections on it, and as a kid, it was my job was to follow us down and then flip it over when we got to the end of that map. And then also along the way, it would tell you, now here's a good place to stop, here's a good place to eat, here's a good place to sleep, those kind of things. So it'd certainly be easier if we knew where we were going, but not only knew where we were going, if we had kind of an idea of how to get there, a path, kind of steps to take along the way. And that's what we're talking about today. Where are we going? Where are we going as spiritual beings? What are we? We have to start with first. We have to start this understanding of what we are and where are we going and how do we get there? Why should we go? Why do we want to go? All these kind of questions that come up with regard to motivation. Motivation, I would say, for throwing ourselves into our spiritual growth is the best way I could put it. To really getting serious about spiritual growth as being important to us. So motivation, when we were teaching it in our training classes, motivation is in its simplest terms desire plus ability. Desire and ability. If you have those two things, according to the training course, they would say you have motivation. And the idea was that if you were a team leader, for example, a project team leader, you had to find a way to motivate people to do what needed to be done. And in corporate America, that was carrot and stick. That's all it ever was. If you get the job done on time or early, you get a bonus, and if you don't, you won't get a big raise or you won't get a promotion, those sorts of things. And then ability was usually defined somewhere as skills, so it was training and it was tools, and do they have the resources? Do they have the tools that they need to do the job? Do they have the proper training to do the job? And that's as far as it ever went, really, in the business world. They didn't typically drill down too much further to kind of identify kind of like the deeper workings of the human mind when it comes to motivation, and that was probably a good enough place to start, And you can kind of see how that works. Last week there was a gentleman who jumped out of an airplane without a parachute at 25,000 feet and free fell and landed in a net, and you saw that, and thank goodness he did it successfully. Nobody was hurt. Well, I don't have any desire to do that. Not a bit. You can take me up in a plane all day long, and I am not going to step out the door at 25,000 feet without a parachute. Not only do I not have the desire, but I don't have the ability. I don't have the ability to do it. Now, that man had been jumping out of airplanes since he was 12 years old, and he had practiced for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of jumps of how to control his body as it fell through the air so that he could hover it over that net, so he could just kind of descend. Once he got over the net, he could stay over it and descend down to it. I don't have the ability to do that either. So I don't have any motivation. I don't have any motivation to jump out of an airplane without a parachute. And probably most of us listening, we don't have that either. So we want to look then at our spiritual growth. We want to look at the evolution of our soul, perhaps to think of it that way, and ask ourselves, are we motivated? Are we motivated to grow spiritually? Do we have the desire? And do we know what to do? Do we have the desire? Do we have the ability? We want to go to the West Coast. Do we have a map on how to get there? What is the destination, if there is such a thing as a destination of our spiritual journey? And how do we get from wherever we are on our journey right now, how do we get just the next step, right? Do we know what the end looks like? Do we know what the end we have in mind is that we are moving towards? But can we take just the next step? Today, can I take the next step today? And tomorrow, can I take the step that is appropriate tomorrow? It's kind of like they teach people in the 12-step programs. Take it one day at a time. Take it one day at a time. Can I just, for today, can I just be sober today? Can I stop doing whatever the addictive behavior was today? And when tomorrow comes, worry about tomorrow. Kind of the Scarlett O'Hara school. I won't worry about that today. I'll worry about that tomorrow. But can we understand our spiritual growth? Can we understand what the end might look like if there is an end? Right? Dr. Holmes tells us we're never going to be done discovering all that God is. We're never going to be done. But we can increase every day. We can increase every day in our understanding. So in order to get there from here, we have to come to some type of a realization or a working definition, if you want to call it that, of what we are. What are we? Now, we have grown up thinking that we are our bodies, and we are not. We are not our bodies. The body that you have today, you didn't have 2 years ago. Every cell in that body has changed. The old cells have died and the new cells have come into being. You certainly don't have the body that you had when you were 5 years old or 10 years old or 21. Just, you don't have it. So the body that you had years ago is gone. It no longer exists as a body. It has gone into dust, and the dust has gone back into the soil, and the old biblical quote, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. So we are not our body, and someday we will leave our body entirely. It's not just a matter of the body changing its cells over. Someday we will leave it entirely. Someday we will be without this particular form. So if we think we are the body and we identify with the body and we kind of stay attached to that idea, we're really not kind of getting a grasp on who we are, what we are. What we can think about is that whatever we are was the observer or the witness that felt it existed in that body. So when excuse me, when I was living as a 5-year-old human being, there was an I that was observing. There was an I that was witnessing. There was an I that was aware of the 5-year-old body, that was aware of the environment that the 5-year-old body lived in. When my 5-year-old body ran, there was an awareness of running. And when it swam, there was an awareness of swimming. See, there was an aliveness, there was an isness, there was a something that was there. And that is what we would call consciousness. Consciousness. And what is consciousness but awareness? Awareness. And we ask ourselves then, well, what is God? See, what is God? We're told as children in catechism that God is spirit. What does that mean, God is spirit? And typically we come to try to understand that spirit is that which is without form, formless. It is, but it is not defined by form. It is. It is consciousness. It is consciousness aware. Awareness. It is not only that which is aware, it is that of which it is aware. It is pure consciousness aware of itself. Aware of itself. And I think we just have to stop. I don't know that we can understand that entirely, but I think we just have to come to to reflect on it. What does that mean? So as human beings, in our human experience, we are aware of something else. We are aware of an object out there. You know, if we want to meditate on a candle, we are aware of the flame. If we want to meditate on a flower, we are aware of the flower. In our waking life, as we go through our waking life, we are aware of many, many things. In fact, we're aware of a lot of things, and there are a lot more things that we're not aware of, right? They're there, but we're just not even paying attention to them. We don't even notice them. We're aware of the sounds. We're aware of the music on the radio. We're aware of the cars in traffic. We are aware of all things, but we are aware of objects that are that are out there. So our consciousness is outwardly directed. Our consciousness is an awareness of things that seem to be separate from, different than, and apart from us. And that is our experience of awareness. When we first begin our spiritual practice in earnest, when we come in and we try to meditate for the first time, or maybe the first 40 years even, you know, but when we are beginning our practice, what happens is we need an object. We need an object to focus our attention upon. We bring our attention to our breath. Breathing is occurring, breathing is coming in, breathing is going out. And we count 1. Breathing is occurring, breathing is coming in, breathing is going out, and we count 2. And it seems very simple, but what happens to us is as we start to do that, and we recognize then that our mind is all over the place, see? Thoughts are here, thoughts are there, thoughts are everywhere. And I bring you back to the elephant that is being led by the monkey. We have this tremendous power, this consciousness that is the innate essence of what we are. And it is like a stray dog wandering the streets, and we follow it. We follow it. That's why the Hindus give us the image of the monkey leading the elephant. So we start to think then, well, why, you know, why do we even want to do this? What is important about that? We start to recognize that when we try to meditate, we become aware of everything that's out there. When we go through life, we are aware of everything that is out there. You might say that we are consciousness, but we are aware of perceived separateness. And we go back and we think about, well, what God is. And there is no separateness in God. There is no apartness in God. There's just the isness or the I amness or the beingness, or some of the Buddhists call it the suchness. It's just the suchness of, it's just the way it is. It just is. Right? It just is. And I'll just mention here an important point that sometimes is a distraction. We may be told as we begin our spiritual journey that what we must do, or what we are moving towards, or perhaps the end that we have in mind, is to accept things as they are. And in our human mind, we say, well, that's the way they are is the way I think they are. And I've got to accept them the way I think they are. And it's a deeper question than that. It's a deeper issue than that. We have to find the suchness, the isness, the I amness, the beingness, because that's the way things are. The way that we think things are is the delusion. It is the monkey mind. It is the monkey running the intellect all over the place. So if we think then about what the divine is that the divine or the divine mind or God is pure consciousness aware of itself. You see, itself. It doesn't perceive everything as apart from or different than. It perceives everything as itself. It is pure consciousness aware of consciousness. Pure consciousness aware of itself. It needs no outside stimulus. It needs no outside object. It just is, you see. It just is. And our experience is that we are and everything else is. And we come to a realization that what our spiritual growth is, what our spiritual growth is all about, it might be, as Goldsmith calls it, consciousness unfolding. Or Zen might call it increasing awareness towards enlightenment. This thing that we perceive to be an end point, at least for now, we might call enlightenment. We might call it the Christ consciousness. We might call it the Buddha consciousness. Liberation, many different terms that are used by many different schools of thought. But I would suggest that for now, we can think of it as arriving at the point of unity, arriving at the point where all experience of otherness is gone, arriving at the point where the sense of separation has left us, that we actually realize through experience our oneness of all life, our oneness of the divine, our oneness with each other. There is no spot where God is not. And the consciousness that is unfolding as me is really the consciousness of the divine expressing itself as me. It has created this thing that I call me out of itself, in its image and likeness, according to its nature. And all I'm saying there is that you and I didn't create the consciousness that we experience ourselves to be. We did not create the bodies that we experience ourselves to be. There is something else that is moving in us, as us, and through us. There is something else that is expressing itself and is aware of itself as us. That is the consciousness of the divine. Now this is kind of a sticking point. This is kind of a real stumbling point for people, because it's obvious that if we are talking about the ego, the human ego, the human idea of what I am as being divine, then this is when it becomes heresy or blasphemy. So when the mystics would have the divine realization that there's no separation between the S with the self with the little s and the self with the big S, or perhaps in the Eastern tradition, the realization that Atman is Brahman, that the I that I think I am is really the I of God expressing itself as me. That when the mystics would have this realization and say, I and the Father are one, or Al-Halaj, who had said, I am God, the fundamentalists would take them out and kill them, because to the fundamentalist mind, to the orthodox mind, that was blasphemy. That is the mind rooted in separation, the mind rooted in apartness. And we have to understand that there is a place along the spiritual path where this realization of isness or suchness or I amness can become so complete that the I that is saying I am one with the divine is not the human I. It is not the egotistical I. It is the I am calling itself I. very hard for us to understand in our human experience, very hard for us to to accept. But we have to kind of look at what is this thing called enlightenment? What is this realization of the Christ consciousness? What is this revelation that John had, that he wrote down in what we have today as the last book in the New Testament? What is this experience of oneness so complete? As Ernest Holmes would tell us, I am not my brother's keeper, I am my brother. Think of it this way. When this idea kind of came to me many years ago, and it really kind of helped me kind of grasp, or at least think I could grasp what we're talking about here. Can imagine that we are all actors in a play, and we're all out on the stage, and we're all performing our role. But imagine that we don't realize that we're actors. Imagine that we think we are the character in the play. You remember the movie Nurse Betty, the lady who thought she was the actual soap opera, the actual person in the soap opera. She identified so much with the character that she became the character, even though she had nothing to do with the show. But imagine that we are all actors out on the stage, and we are all performing these roles, but we don't realize that we're performing. We don't realize that we are a different I pretending to be this character in the film or on the stage. We're so caught up in the role that we've identified with it. There was a movie many years ago. There was a movie, and the actor, I think Jeremy Irons, was in it, and he played twin brothers in the movie. He played both roles. And then as a twist, there was a part of the movie where he played one twin brother impersonating the other twin brother. Now, watching the movie, you kind of really had to pay attention. Which brother is he? And is he one brother pretending to be the other brother? The characters were very complex. And I saw an interview with Jeremy Irons, and the interviewer said, well, how did you manage to portray this complex role in a manner so that the audience would be able to know which character you were at the time? Were you brother A or brother B, or were you brother A pretending to be brother B, and all these kind of questions? And he described the process that he went through of trying to create a unique identity for each of the characters by bringing his attention, his attention of his body's energy to particular chakras. So when he played Brother A, he tried to keep his focused attention on one chakra and to allow his energy in the scene to come from that center in his body. And when he played the other brother, he would use a different energy center, and he would speak his lines, and even though the dialect was the same, they were identical twin brothers, but he would put his attention and his energy into a different part of his body. And then when he had to portray the one brother being the other brother, he would go back to the first energy center, and he would try to move the energy from that center to the other. And it sounded, I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, wow, that is just mind-boggling how he could do that. But my point is that even though there were 3 different characters that he portrayed, Jeremy Irons, the actor, had a sense that it was he, Jeremy Irons, portraying each of these different individuals. And yet when we come into life, when we wake up in life, we are not aware that we are actors in a play. We get so caught up in the role, we get caught up in the identity, that we think that is who we are, that is what we are. And eventually we start to come to the realization that there is something that is projecting its consciousness through us, just as Jeremy Irons was projecting his consciousness through the three different characters. There is something that is projecting its consciousness through us as an actor on the stage of life. And that something is the divine. That something is the divine I am. We did not create our own consciousness. We did not create our own body. We did not create this world. There is something moving through us. There is something that projected itself through the body when it was 5 years old, when it was 10 years old, when it was 50 years old, when it was 70 years old. And there's something that will be projecting itself after these bodies have ceased to be. And we must come to realize that that is what we are. That is the essence of what we are. And our spiritual growth and our spiritual practice is for the purpose of increasing our awareness of that every day that we can, every day of our lives, every moment that we can remember it. This is our purpose. This is why we are here. This is what we must do. So Goldsmith tells us when we first get interested in spiritual growth, sometimes what we try to do is we try to bring God down to the human level and get God to work for us and give us a better human life, you know. More stuff, a Mercedes-Benz, color TV, and all of those different things. And Dr. Holmes tells us that it's natural that we do kind of these things. We try to figure out how to tap into our spiritual nature, our spiritual force, our spiritual power, if you want to call it that. This great elephant that exists but is being led around by the monkey, we try to harness it and we try to make it do stuff for us. And eventually we have to realize that it's not about taming the elephant, taking control away from the monkey to put it to work. It's about recognizing and unifying with it. It is about becoming one with it. So there are stages of awakening. Even though all of the consciousness that there is right here, right now, we are not aware of it all right here and right now. And there are stages that we go through as we awaken. And in the Hindu tradition, they kind of give us the 9 levels of tranquility, and the first one starts with that picture I gave you of the monkey leading the elephant. It's like we sit down and say, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to meditate for a few minutes, and it's going to be so peaceful, and all of a sudden the monkey mind just starts flying everywhere, all over the place, and we are totally out of control. And here's this one thing that the only thing that we have to work with. Where are we going to find God? And not out there. The only place we're going to find it is through our own consciousness, through mind, through experiencing oneness. But where do we experience the oneness? We don't experience it out there in the world of separation. We can only experience it here. So if we start to think about motivation, we might think, well, our desire might be to grow every day into a deeper awareness of this oneness, because that is the end result. That is where we're going. Everything else is turning to dust. Everything else is going away. But the consciousness that projects itself through us and as us always will be. And it is our destiny to discover more of that every day. So our desire then is to be at home with the beloved, to experience the oneness, not to get it to give us more stuff, but to just learn to be with it, to just learn to experience it, because it is pure consciousness aware of itself. And that is home. That is back in the garden. That is where we are going. And then the practice that we go through, because when we start, you see the monkey is leading the elephant everywhere in many different directions. These are distractions. These are distractions that we allow, and sometimes we seek out the distractions to keep us from doing what we know we must do, you know. I was thinking this morning when Lori and I worked in New York City, there were several different ways that we could get home. You know, you could take the train all the way, or you could take the bus part of the way and then take the train. Or take the train part of the way and then take the bus. I mean, there were several different ways, but there was one route that had a bakery right by the bus stop, Lord's Bakery. And if you go that way, it was impossible not to go in there and buy a loaf of Jewish rye bread and start to eat it on the bus ride home. So we would meet in New York and we would discuss, how do you want to go home tonight? And, you know, more times than not, we decided on the route that took us by that bakery. See? We like to be distracted. We like the diversions. We like the little nice things in life. And when we start to sit down and to do what we know that we must do for our spiritual practice, which is to learn to separate ourselves from all of the distractions, to learn to separate ourselves from all of the things in the world out there, to learn to separate ourselves from even the egotistical sense of I that is somehow separate from everybody else. It is only natural that the monkey mind will try to distract us, and we will be delighted. We will be delighted to be distracted. We sit down and meditate and think, oh, well, I really need to do this thing that I've been putting off for the last 3 weeks, but I'll go do it now. You know, it's a distraction. So what it takes at the beginning is it takes discipline. Discipline is the ability to do what needs to be done when it needs to be done. You know, and we're looking now at the Olympics, and we're looking at these young people who can do incredible things with their bodies. Swimming and running and all kinds of things, but it all gets down to discipline. Discipline. If you watch the profiles, they talk about how they've been training since they're 5 years old, and how they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and they go train before they go to school, and it gets down to discipline. So when we first begin our spiritual practice, we have to have the discipline. We have to set a time, we have to set a place, we have to have a timer. You know, you can use a timer on your microwave, or you can download a meditation timer off the internet. But we have to do it. No matter what the result is, we have to do it. You know, we just have to simply sit down and learn how to bring our attention to just one thing, just one object. And usually it's our breath. Inhale through the nose, count 1. Exhale through the lips, listen to the sound the breath makes. Inhale through the nose, count 2. Exhale through the lips, listen to the sound that the breath makes. Count from 1 to 5 and go back to 1. And what we find when we begin this is that we can't get to 5. First time we get to 5, we go, ooh, I got to 5, and then we forget, well, wait a second, what was I doing? And we got to go back to 1. And it's just that simple discipline, that simple practice, that what it is doing is it is training the mind to ignore distractions. It is taking the lead from the monkey, and it is getting the elephant of our mind, our consciousness, to stay on one path. Now we progress in stages, you know, and at first it may be effort. At first it may require discipline. At first it may seem like torture. We may have to flog ourselves in order to get ourselves to do it. Just joking there. But that's what it takes. Just like these athletes who had to get themselves into the pool at 5 o'clock in the morning, or onto the track at 5 o'clock in the morning, or into the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning. We have to develop a discipline in our practice. What happens to us is then, for increasing amounts of time, we can keep our attention focused on one thing. So now we are riding the elephant. Now we are getting it to do what we want it to do, not what the monkey wants it to do, what we want it to do. And we might think, well, that's wonderful, that's great, but then what? And this is where growth really starts to kick in for us. All of that was just simply preparation. All of that was simply a means to get us to the next stage of awakening, right? To the next stage of increased awareness, to the next stage of consciousness unfolding through us. And what happens then is we get to a point where we are so disciplined, we are so integrated, that this idea that there is us and a mind that has to be tamed is gone, you see. Because at the beginning we are even separate from our own mind. We are separate from ourselves. There's this thing called me, whatever that is, and I have to tame this mind. I have to control this mind. I have to rein this elephant in. So there's still a sense of duality, a sense of separation there that we're working with, you see. And at some point along the way, what happens is the sense of I and my mind goes away. My mind falls off. There's just I. But we continue our practice. We continue being with the I. Some of the mystics say there's a point where all thought stops, and I've never reached that. I've reached a point where conscious effort for thought has stopped. But we continue in our practice until we reach a point where this sense of, I need to do this, I need to make myself do this, I need to sit down and have the discipline to do this, that drops off, because the sense of struggle between the I and the mind are gone. We are now integrated. And we continue our practice. And then what happens is there's a point where the sense of I drops off. The ego, I, is gone. There is just the suchness. There is just the isness of life. There is awareness of the suchness. There is awareness of the isness. But there's not a sense of separation in that I am the one aware of the isness, the suchness, the beingness. The isness, the awareness, the suchness, the beingness, the I amness is aware of itself. And as spiritual discipline, as spiritual practice developed through the eons, it used to end right there. People used to say, well, that's it. When you get to that point, boom, you're one with everything. There's nothing beyond that. But as years went by, another stage was added. The realization of another stage was added. And that was of going back into the world. Going back into the world without being attached to the idea of apartness, the idea of separateness, the idea of materialism, the idea of stuff. It is what the New Testament tells us as being in the world but not of it is all about. It is the idea of the Buddha coming back to teach, as long as there are beings who are willing to listen and to apply. It is being able to be in the world and yet be one with everything in the world, even the dysfunctional part of the world. It is being there and recognizing that all of this is just a play, a drama on a stage. And yes, everybody believes that they are the character that they're playing. Everybody believes that they are the role that they are playing, but none of that is true. It is the Maya. It is the illusion. So I invite you this week to really contemplate the ideas that we're talking about today. What are you? What are you? You're not your body, you're not your name, you're not your job, you're not your you're not your relationship. That's not what you are. What are you? What is God? What created all of this? What is it? Work with it until you come to your own understanding, to your own realization. Ask yourself if the things that you heard today, if they're true, why are they true? If they're not true, why are they not true? What is the truth to you? What is it? What is your understanding? Personalize it. Take the message. Ask yourself, what am I in relationship to that? What are you in relationship to that? Whatever God is, what is your relationship with that? And by that I don't mean saying, like I have a relationship with God as you hear some kind of professions of faith, and I'm not knocking any of those. But I'm saying to understand that it is our very life. Is that so? Is that true? How do I know that it's so? Where did my life come from? What created me? Did consciousness arise simply because my little body began to grow in my mother's womb? Did the body grow and at some point a soul was infused into it, as some of the theologies tell us? Did I choose this particular body in these circumstances? All of these kind of questions, to ponder, to think about, only for the purpose of saying, who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? If you come to the place of thinking, well, I must be consciousness, not my circumstances, then ask yourself, well, how much do I want to explore that? What is my desire? What is my motivation? Do I really want to explore more of that? Or do I want to just have a better human life while I'm here? And if I do want to explore that more, then am I willing to do the practice that needs to be done? Do I have the discipline to sit down and to begin right where I am? If I can't do it for 20 minutes, can I do it for 10? If I can't do it for 10, can I do it for 5? If I can't do it for 5, can I do it for 2? But begin where I am. Begin where I am. I remember one of the human interest stories they had on the news one time, and it was a lady who had been very unhealthy. Was in poor shape physically, endurance, cardio. She was very overweight, and she was able to begin an exercise program and a diet. And over time, she regained her health. And the person interviewing her said, how did you start? And she said, I walked down to the mailbox. They said, that's it? She said, that's it. That's all I could do. She got up, she walked down to the mailbox, she walked back into the house. And the first day she did it once. And a couple days later, she did it twice. But over time, she regained her health. Start where you are. Wherever you are, start where you are. See, this is one of the fallacies of our society. We always want to start someplace we're not. We think, well, after I lose the first 10 pounds, then I'm going to go on my diet, or after I lose the first 10 pounds, then I'm going to begin my exercise program. You've got to start where you are. Wherever you are on your spiritual path, start there. Whatever you're doing, increase. Increase. Increase your awareness, increase your consciousness, increase your practice. Recognize that at the beginning it is going to take discipline. You're going to have to chase that monkey down and wrestle it for the lead to get control of that elephant. But after you go through that phase, you're going to be riding the elephant. then after you go through that phase, the elephant's just going to follow you. And after you go through that phase, you won't even think about the elephant. And then after you go through that phase, you won't even think about yourself. And then you will be able to function in the world without a sense of self, without a sense of ego, without a sense of otherness or apartness or separateness. Then you will truly be the light into the world. So I invite you to contemplate these things this week and ask yourself, is this something you want to do? Is this something that you ought to do? Do you have the desire to do it? Do you have the ability to do it? If you don't have the desire, what can you do to increase the desire? If you have the desire but not the ability, what can you do to increase your ability? Can you learn how to meditate? Can you study more? Those sorts of things. And hopefully, if not today, if not this week, hopefully at some point, if you're not already there, at some point, your burning desire will be to know more of God today than you knew yesterday. And that's all. Increase awareness, one day at a time. Consciousness unfolding. The universe is expanding. Your consciousness is expanding. God is expanding through you and as you. Cooperate with it. Surrender to it. Enjoy the ride. So it is.